So I'm really delighted to see you all and really talk a little bit about data and how you would build data. And I've been fascinated about the talks I've heard thus far today. I just think everybody has touched on things that we all care about. You know, where the data comes from, how we use it, how we store it, how we use it with compute. So I wanted to share with you that there are many people all over the world thinking about the same thing. So I just want to start with where we all are. I mean, you should always start a talk with not why do I care about this, but why should you care about this? And, you know, at the end of the day, technology is an enabler for applications. You know, the technology really gets us to places that we want to go. And if you kind of think about it from in a very simple framework, you know, all of our applications use different configurations of compute and data and network. And in fact, you know, we specialize in infrastructure for various sorts of it. You know, for clouds or for big compute, big data, you know, crowdsourcing, those kinds of things. But if you think about it, you know, today's applications and the applications that we care about really span the spectrum. And so all throughout this space, they're extremely valuable applications. And the fact is that data is a particularly exciting tool for many of these applications, whether you're using big data, whether you're using small data, whether it's, you know, data that you have to worry about the memory and bandwidth and the compute, et cetera, or whether it's data coming from the outside in the cloud, it's really important. So today I want to kind of focus on the data part, but at the end of the talk really get to how that data connects to compute for all of us. So let's just think about this data, and in particular, among the kinds of data infrastructure and the way we use data, I want to kind of look at data sharing. And, you know, why do I want to look at data sharing? Because everywhere you look, making your data available allows not just people in your community to do really fantastic things in expected ways, but it allows people in other communities to often use your data in unexpected ways. You can go through your favorite periodicals or Google and kind of come up with your own version of these. But as you share data, it's made a tremendous difference. And the kind of infrastructure we use to store that data, to keep that data, to serve it up, and to share it turns out to be tremendously important in our ability to get the results from that data. So let's talk about data infrastructure. And one of the things I want to point out is that we need data infrastructure of two types. So we're used to talking about technical infrastructure. So for example, I need my systems to interoperate. So, you know, I want to go all over the world and I want to go to my hotel room, I want to read my email. And what I don't want to do is sort of wait for all the plug manufacturers around the world to agree on the exact shape, size, color, and number of prongs of my plug. I don't need them to do that. I just bring my plug adapter for whichever country I'm in. You know, I put it in, it's very easy to use. It helps my systems interoperate. Standards, metadata, why do we need that? We need that so we can agree on things, so we can put those things together and build things. We do this in the real world all the time. If I want to build a house and I go to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, you know, I don't have to make up the size of lumber I need or the kind of plumbing I need. I can use components that, you know, my industry is generally agreed on. Policy and practice make a tremendous difference as well. When we make a policy that says no smoking, it changes people's behavior. When NIH says, if you want money from for your project from us, you have to put your data in an open access data commons, that makes a tremendous difference for the community. And for those of you who've talked about biomedical data and health data, the policies that our agencies are adopted are making a big difference in our ability to use data. Same thing with practice. Motor vehicle laws cover most of the things we do. Community practice covers the rest of it. So as communities, we come together and we kind of decide are you going to handle it when you get into an intersection and there's a bus coming. You know, maybe all of your laws don't do that. And of course, nothing happens without sustainable economics, especially in data land. If your data doesn't have a home anymore, it disappears. So somebody's got to pay the mortgage on that home. Somebody has got to make sure that that data is available for you. And of course, we need people who know how to use these technologies. So all of these provide social and technical support for data sharing. They provide infrastructure. Well, this is kind of what brought us to develop and found the RDA, Research Data Alliance, about 2 years ago. And really the history of the RDA is that federal R&D agencies, like NSF, NIH, DOE, NIST, those kinds of agencies all around the world were getting together at these international enclaves and really talking about what their communities needed in terms of data sharing and exchange. And one of the things they wanted to do is help their communities. So a number of us got together and really created in each country a framework by which we could create an international organization called the Research Data Alliance. And the idea was to build social and technical infrastructure that helps somebody solve some problem, period. That's what we're doing. We're building infrastructure, and that infrastructure has to help solve problems. And the idea is because it's such a broad community and because it's a worldwide community, it's really helping us create more global coordinated infrastructure to support data sharing and exchange. So I'll tell you a little bit about the organization. So we build infrastructure in three kinds of ways. Cohorts that build infrastructure within the Research Data Alliance are called working groups. Our working groups kind of focus on three kinds of things. You can think of this as technical parts of the data engine. So we have working groups on data type registries. They create a reference model, so we have the same vocabulary that both machines and people can read. The people looking at wheat data interoperability, so all of the different kinds of data sources. So you can look at wheat and agricultural productivity have to come together to build infrastructure. There's working groups that look at data citation. So this is social infrastructure. There's common agreement on how you cite data, all the versioning and all the different things you can do. Common practice for data repositories. So we have data repositories for a lot of different domains in this country and all around the world. There's best practices. When they exchange best practices, they become better repositories. And we're also interested in better drivers. So the idea is a better technical workforce, people with more understanding of data science, people understanding doing more sophisticated things around data, like creating a viable data management plan, et cetera. So what's the approach? So RDA members, and there are nearly 3,000 of them right now, come together as two kinds of entities, working groups and interest groups. Working groups are groups that come together for 12 to 18 months. Their job is to build, adopt, and use specific pieces of infrastructure. So they build them, they use them, and the group moves on. Interest groups are longer-lived groups, and they really need to have the discussion about what pieces of infrastructure are useful. And once they have that discussion, oftentimes they spit off one or more working groups to build that infrastructure and then continue that discussion as the interest group. RDA culture is very pragmatic. It's just sort of the just do it kind of culture. All working groups have to incorporate adopters. We don't do any build it and they will come. If you think something's important to build, it's because it's solving somebody's problem. That somebody, or at least somebody, has to be in as part of the group. Our infrastructure has to solve problems, but it doesn't have to solve everybody's problems. We're not waiting for all the plug manufacturers to get together and create the universal plug. We're not waiting for the universal layered diagram of global infrastructure. The point is to just build a piece of infrastructure that people need, allow them to use it so they can make progress on their applications, and then move on. If you can still use that infrastructure in 5 years, terrific. If more people than you can use the infrastructure, terrific. If not, that's okay, because at least the people that needed it have it. It allows us to amplify the impact when possible. So right now we've been very proactive in looking at additional adopters, not just the ones that were in the working group, that could perhaps use the infrastructure that's being built and help them with that. Also, in terms of collaborating with other organizations. We are not the only data organization around. We're not looking to dominate the world. The idea is to really work with other data organizations so the data community itself can be a little bit more articulate, can create a common agenda, can be a little stronger, and can do more useful stuff. Okay, so here's our community. We launched in Gothenburg, Sweden in March of 2013. By July, we had 393 members, and it's gone up since then. Last March, we had our plenary in San Diego. We had a little over 2,700 members from about 95 or more countries. This pie chart changes over time. What's been really interesting to me is the combined US and North American percentage is actually going down. The number of people is going up, but what that means is that we've seen more traction for the RDA in Australia, Asia, Africa, South America, and countries all over the world. It means that not just more people are coming, but a greater percentage of people are joining the RDA, and that's really important because this is a global organization. There's not an eye chart, no test, but the idea is just to give you an idea of what members are working on. RDA doesn't tell anybody what to work on. If people think that RDA would be a useful vehicle to get their work done, to get a little bit more recognition, to extend their network to other kinds of domains and professions, to extend their network to international colleagues, many of those folks have found RDA. You find interest groups. These are people who are thinking about needed infrastructure in anything from marine data to legal interoperability of data, to biodiversity data, to structural biology data, digital practices in history and ethnography and the digital humanities data, very, very important. So there's a lot of these kinds of groups. So I thought I would give you an example of one of them. And this is, I'll tell you a little bit about the Domain Repositories Interest Group. So for those of you that are fans, as I am, of George Alter, who runs the Inter-University Consortium for Social and Political Research. That's a data repository associated with the University of Michigan. They've been around for 50 years. 50 years they've been around, and they do a tremendously wonderful job. George got together with a number of other domain repositories for data, including Peter Doorn from DANS in the Netherlands, Ruth Doerr from National Snow and Ice Data Center, Bob Hanisch, who was at the Virtual Observatory for Astronomy and now at NIST, and a bunch of other people. Those are just the co-chairs. And so here's what they're doing. They got together because these repositories are really critical for stewardship and preservation of data. As we all go to the agencies and we get put in our proposals, and they have data management plans, and they say, is your data valuable to you or your colleagues or other people? You know, somebody's got to host that data. And these data repositories provide a really important service to the community. The interest group brings together active people from all kinds of domains, including the Protein Data Bank and ecology and other kinds of things from around the world. And they're focusing on how they do their work there. They look at data curation, dissemination, preservation, institutional sustainability, et cetera. And what they're doing is not just exchanging best practices, but they're also able to use the work products of RDA working groups. So they're thinking about and incorporating data citation, metadata, certification of data repositories. These are all other interest groups, what they're doing. And so what's the impact of this interest group? First of all, they're helping to strengthen their own organization. They're creating valuable fabric with other people in their own community, and they're providing a better environment for users for stewardship and preservation. So this has been a really useful group for them. Now remember, interest groups talk about infrastructure, and and in fact the Domain Repositories is spitting off some working group stuff. These are folks who have already committed to build infrastructure. They've been vetted by a technical review board, the RDA Council, and the RDA community, and they're now busy building infrastructure. And you can see it's kind of all over the space. So think about the x-axis as the beneficiary dimension, y-axis as solutions dimension, and you see if you kind of go from technical to social infrastructure and data providers to data consumers, we're starting to see a very interesting kind of mesh of different kinds of groups looking at different things and in fact sharing information with each other. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about one of my favorites, which is the Wheat Data Interoperability Group. This group is co-chaired by folks from the French National Institute for Agricultural Research, the Indian Statistical Institute, and the UN, and a number of their colleagues are on it. And they're looking at the following problem. If you want to look at agricultural productivity, you want to combine all kinds of data about, in this case, wheat itself, genotypic and phenotypic information, soil analysis, climate data. You want to make sure you've got the metadata right, you've got the right interoperability frameworks, et cetera. And when you do this, you can coordinate to answer complex questions. This is also very interesting to policymakers who care about things like hunger and thinks about what you can do from a government basis on that. The RDA Wheat Data Interoperability Group is developing a common integration framework that includes these components, standards and vocabularies, and adoption of tools and ontologies and formats. And all of that will be incorporated in the wheat information system. And that wheat information system is a really important component as people start looking at these complex problems. Once you've got this, remember I said, if somebody else can do this, this would be great. With some adaptation, because it's not the same, this framework will then be used by the rice community and the maize community to start looking at issues for them. Build some infrastructure, answer some problems, move on. So that's what we're trying to do with the RDA. Okay, so next steps. So, really, if you look through RDA, and it's like a little short life here, as we go on, we're looking at building more infrastructure, more and more working groups, more and more deliverables, solving problems that people need, a more effective data community. Can we create the connections between all the people that come to the RDA meetings? These meetings are like kind of the Noah's Ark of the data community. You have, chemists, you have people who run repositories, you have librarians, you have information scientists, you have marine biologists, you have policymakers, you have all kinds of people, people interested in HPC. You have all kinds of people coming to these communities. These relationships are really, really important. And then the idea is to have really more impact-focused outreach with new organizations, new generations. RDA is really committed to bringing in early career professionals and students. We want to give them the best start possible to solve very, very difficult, complex problems as they go in their career. And of course, it's an amazing community, so this hooks them in early. And then we'll keep meeting. So our plenaries are twice a year. They're all around the world because most of the places we go are inconvenient for almost everyone. We want them to be convenient for someone. So we'll be in Paris in September. We were just in San Diego last March. We'll be in Tokyo next March, Montreal or Washington in September, then Barcelona, then parts unknown. If you're interested in RDA, and we really welcome new members, it's free. You can sign up right now before I finish my talk if you like. You have to agree to RDA principles, which is basically principles of openness, community-driven, et cetera. So why am I giving this talk here, you might wonder. Oh, let me just tell you one slide about RDA US. So because RDA is international, each of the regions have extra stuff going on. And the extra stuff going on is to really help build their own community. And so for us in the US, we have RDA US. And currently there are about 1,000 members of RDA in 46 states. If you happen to live in Nevada, we really welcome you. I've got to get all those guys blue. It would be really cool. So the idea is to really look at all the different data issues for people all over. We do a lot of different things in RDA US. We're very committed to student and early career programs supported by NSF, and Sloan has just stepped forward in a really generous way. Target outreach to communities, community support. We have adoption amplification seed projects for people who want to start it. So we just gave a little bit of a start to Washington University St. Louis libraries and material scientists at Kent State and NIST to start looking at adoption of some deliverables from RDA. We host plenaries, and we do a number of other kinds of things. So why am I talking to you about this? Now I'll go back to that. And we talked to, I think there's a special opportunity for the RDA to partner with the HPC community. So let's take this, this landscape, and let's look at the part that really requires some of the fabulous facilities that all of you are associated with. And think about all of the different applications that really require sufficient size computing. And if you think about it, many of those applications have real data issues. Some of them spit out so much data or require so much data close to the machine that it's really, that throwing the hard drive across the room, if you threw 300 of those hard drives across the room or across the country, it's just not so feasible. So there's a particular opportunity, I think, in kind of looking at the big compute, big data space. Because all of those things need, more analysis, more visualization. Oftentimes they need gateways and portals and websites, temporary data storage, and quite a lot of it for some of them, options for long-term stewardship and prevention, targeted and strategic solutions to move the data or move the compute, and this varies. And so the idea is, it would be very useful to have an interest group or a working group that could really start looking at that kind of infrastructure. This is a flash from my past. Maybe Ron will recognize this. This is what we tried to do when I was at San Diego Supercomputer Center. I was there from 2001 to 2009. You kind of think about the first decade and all the ways in which, as an HPC center, we pushed out in the data direction. We really looked at HPC data and ways of doing analytics. We looked at visualization and management and portals and storage and preservation and services, and there were a number of different projects, and those projects kind of came together in creating a data fabric that made it useful for many of our colleagues who use the center. These are the kinds of things that big facilities can do. And if big facilities used RDA as a vehicle in order to come together and create that kind of group, that would be really terrific. I think that's a really special kind of thing that not everyone can do. The big facilities, the HPC community can do, and RDA would be a great vehicle for that. So here's my pitch to you. If you think that might be interesting, in addition to interacting with these many other groups as it is reasonable for you, we would really welcome people thinking about a new interest group or a new working group that really looks at big data intersect big compute. Because I think that's a place we really need infrastructure where I think it would be useful to get a global community involved. And with that, I want to thank you.